Welcome to MedTech Disruptors. My name is David Philby. I'm the founder of Elevra Consulting. On this show, we interview commercial leaders who have taken a disruptive technology from early phase through to launch or even merger and acquisition. It's all about the journey, the highs and the lows, how to create new markets, what is high performance culture, the risks and rewards, and leading commercial teams in growth companies. We hope this gives you good insight and advice on how to advance your own career. Welcome, and I hope you enjoy the show. This week we were joined by Craig Ingram, who has a wealth of experience working with disruptive medtech companies to bring them to life, and now operates through his own commercial consultancy. We took a deep dive into the problems that companies are experiencing and why so many companies fail, including him revealing his 10-step commercialization component strategy. Let's get into it. Thank you, Craig, for joining the episode. I'm super excited to have this conversation because the last time we spoke, I felt like we shared a lot of the same perspectives on approach to commercialization, and you had some super interesting ideas and perspectives based on your experience and opinions, but also based on the timing and how early you're getting involved in companies and their lack of commercialization, let's call it. So I wanted to really dig into your perspectives because it's all about disruptive technologies and startups and how they're going to survive and let alone thrive. But I guess firstly, be great for you to introduce yourself, who you are and what you've done and what you're doing.
Yeah, so my name is Craig T. Ingram. People know me as Craig T. I got that nickname from being on a social media app where people just started calling me Craig T. So that just kind of stuck. So now I have people like J.T. Fox and Tony Robbins and Adam Coffey and Hugh Hilton and all kinds of other people that call me Craig T. So I guess that's my nickname. So basically what I do is focus on small, medium enterprise companies and venture capital-based startups. And what my firm does is help them. We come alongside of them and make their commercialization more effective. And people say, well, how do you do that? Well, there's 4 ways that we do that. I created a commercial strategy and commercialization audit back in, it was after my almost 10 years at being at J&J, in a couple startups within J&J, and then I started going to venture capital-based startups. And I found that the way that they were commercializing their products were completely different than the way Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 companies were commercializing their products. And the 2 immediate startups that I was in were very successful. And I'm talking very successful in the amount of profitability and the amount of customer adoption, because the profitability doesn't come without the customer adoption, but they're 2 different metrics, right? You're going to look at, your annual, rate of return on your commercial strategy, the money that you're putting in, to see what is the rate of market share, what is the rate of customer adoption, what is the rate of EBITDA, right? And unfortunately, so many companies focus on revenue. They don't focus on what is our EBITDA. And the EBITDA is what separates successful companies from unsuccessful companies. And the biggest thing is, people say, Craig, why is there such a high rate of startup companies shutting their doors at 5 years, at 8 years, and at 10 years? And it comes down to 2 things. They don't know their unit level economics, and they're commercializing incorrectly to where they're not getting high levels of customer adoption of the products and services that company offers to their specific target market. When you look at the data and I can only speak for the United States with this specific data. When you look at the SBA.gov, the Small Business Administration, they have the data. And then you look at private equities like KKR, Apollo, BlackRock, major private equity companies that gather just trillions and trillions amount of data a year. This is the data that I'm about to talk to you about. This is real. And the most recent data we have is from 2013 to 2023. And this is the data. 55% of companies, startup companies, that are well funded through the venture capital firms shut their doors at 5 years. That's alarming.
Yeah.
When you look at the data at 8 and 10 years, depending on the data you are extrapolating the information from, it's between 72% and 77% of companies completely shut their doors between 8 and 10 years because they're underfunded, because they don't have enough customer adoption that is funding the business. Now, if you look at the broader scheme, people say, well, what constitutes a small business? You know, if there's $1 billion company and they have under 500 employees, I don't know if you know this, but it was a shock to me when I found this out. It is still considered a small business.
Right.
A small business is not based upon the revenue or the EBITDA that they post. It's based on the amount of employees that are W-2 employees here in the United States. So if a company has 500 or less employees, they are considered a small business in the United States, no matter what the revenue is. There's only 3,007 companies in 2024 that sold that had revenue, top line revenue of $1 billion US dollars or greater. That's it. 3,007 companies. Roughly 2,000 of them are publicly traded and roughly 1,000 are privately held. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so when you look at the data that is coming through and you start analyzing it, the vast majority of companies are actually not successful.
Do you think this is a recent trend over the last sort of 10, 20 years that's getting worse because of the landscape and mentality of people chase funding, right? They chase survival rather than profit, and some companies just are never even focused as a milestone and go, we need to achieve certain levels of profit. Do you think that's something that is worsening because of the landscape and sort of a habit of raising capital, or do you think it's something that has always been that way and unfortunately is a real sort of deep ingrained 50-year style of business in the US that is going to be almost incredibly difficult to change?
There's such a difference between private equity, venture capital, and autonomous business, right? It's kind of like those three sectors. Autonomous business wants to get profitable as soon as humanly possible.
Okay.
Either because they're bootstrapping or angel investors or friends and families have invested, and so they want to get them paid back with an appropriate amount of interest for loaning them that money. So they want to become profitable as soon as possible so that they can survive on their own. That's private equity's standpoint as well. Private equity says you need to have a positive EBITDA profitability before we're willing to either buy you or be part of your organization as one of our portfolio companies. We want to make sure that you're a company that is not a dog with fleas, right? So we're looking, generally speaking, private equity looks to be owning companies that have a 10% or greater EBITDA, generally speaking, right? So if they're 10 million in revenue, they're looking for 1 million of EBITDA. The venture capital world's interesting, and there's so many different um, mindsets. Some companies say, well, we just want as many customers as possible. We don't need to be profitable. And based upon our revenue, we will sell our company at X multiple. But that's starting to change because without high levels of customer adoption, you're not going to bring in the revenue and you're not going to end up having a profitable company. There's also a mindset where, and I've heard this multiple times, well, we're a small startup and we're not profitable, but when we get all of this influx of capital into our company and we get bigger, then we'll be profitable. That's such a backwards way to think. Because if you look at the overwhelming vast majority of serial entrepreneurs who are worth 8, 9, and even a few billionaires, which I've personally been able to have one-on-one conversations with 7 literal liquid net worth billionaires. Almost all of them, and I say almost because there might be one, but I can't think of anything. So as of right now, I'm going to say 100% of the people that I've talked to that can literally write a check for $50 million and it won't bounce. One of my coaches is worth $400 million liquid. He could write that check and it won't bounce. And I say that because that's impressive. They're clearly doing something that everybody else is not doing. And in their mind, it's all about being able to make the company work when it's small. If it doesn't work small, it will not work when it gets bigger, which is why there is such a high rate of companies shutting their doors at 5, 7, 8, and 10 years. And it's not because they're getting acquired. It's because the funding has stopped because their commercialization processes, strategies, and tactics are broken. So I have set out with 4 people on my team to help startup and mid-stage growth companies, your small, medium enterprise companies, to not go out of business. And I am literally hell-bent on trying to save as many companies as possible to make sure that their commercialization is effective and not ineffective. But the C-suite executive team have to be willing to say, hey, we don't have it all together. We would rather get it right and make millions and change our family tree for generations from a financial aspect. And I don't need to be right.
Yeah.
But then I'm also working right now with a couple VCs where a handful of their portfolio companies, the C-suite executive team are digging in their heels saying, no, we're totally successful. And you look under the hood, they are far from it.
When you talk about those C-suite in startups, the my assumption would be that there's 2 problems in that. One, the company is their baby and they want to be perceived to be successful, which means that there's an ego that stops
Well, and
them.
we all have ego, right?
Sure.
The key is to be able to say, hey, I am totally comfortable in my skill set and in my business acumen to say, I don't know it all.
Mm.
So I'm going to go ahead and hire Craig and his team to come alongside of us and help us get to where we need to be so that we can have a positive EBITDA and sell this company for 4, 6, 8 times multiple, depending on their EBITDA and their business model and everything, and change my family tree forever. I still pay for business coaching. I have an MBA. I don't ever tell anybody I have an MBA, right? Because at the end of the day, I will tell you, I'm not that impressed, right? Because if the company's not gaining a high rate of customer adoption, there is a problem with the commercialization, and either one of the 10 components, or maybe there's a thread of truth in all of the 10 components of commercialization, where there are deficiencies and gaps that we call the kryptonite, right? That is ripping and stealing the power away from each one of those 10 components of commercialization. Because there's no way that everybody in a company, whether it's a C-suite or the senior level team or the mid-level management team, nobody knows everything. The biggest problem I see is that people that are coming from a Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 company, and they come into a startup or a mid-stage growth, small, medium enterprise company that's, 20 million, 25 million and under, or a very early age startup, they try to commercialize their products the way that they saw it modeled at a Baxter, a J&J, a Medtronic, a Stryker, a Becton Dickinson, right? Thermo Fisher, whoever it might be. You cannot, as a startup or even a small medium enterprise company, commercialize your products and services the same way those big billion-dollar multinational conglomerate companies commercialize, because they have the logos. When you have those logos on your business card, you are not going to have a problem getting meetings. You're not going to have a problem getting customers to buy the products and services that you offer. So even if you commercialize ineffectively or wrong or not optimally, those companies are still going to sell hundreds of millions of dollars worth of products,
Right.
because they've been around 40, 50, 60, 70
Yeah.
years, if not longer. But startups and mid-stage growth companies don't have that luxury. And they get really one or two shots to get it right. And then the VC companies go, I'm done. I'm not putting any more money into you guys. You're not getting the customer adoption that you need to be self-sufficient and to pay us back.
Where do you personally, where did you learn this about startups the most? So you did 10 years with J&J and learned their style of commercialization, and then you've gone into many different things, and now you're doing this, you're doing the commercialization strategy consultancy across many startups. What were the points of your journey that taught you this is all wrong? This is how the startups are approaching this.
Whether it be from a sales rep standpoint, a regional director standpoint, national director standpoint, or VP of sales and marketing, which I've done them all. Watching what people do and how they do it, and then seeing the fruit or lack thereof, shows you what they're doing wrong. And the only way that I've seen companies commercialize really awesome, or other companies commercialize really poorly, there's a big gap, right? And I've been part of both. I've made plenty of mistakes. I'm still going to make mistakes in the future. But I'm comfortable with my skill set, and I'm comfortable with my business acumen to say, hey, I still need to be coached by people who are way more financially successful than I am. And that's why I still pay for coaching. I've spent over $300,000 in my entire career on business coaching from 8, 9, and 10-figure liquid net worth entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And by not only seeing firsthand, being in these startups and mid-stage growth companies and seeing what works and what doesn't, getting coached by people who have had multiple companies in multiple different industries, and they all are doing big amounts of EBITDA. Notice I didn't say big amounts of revenue. Of course, you got to have big amounts of revenue in order to have big amounts of EBITDA. But it's the earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, right? The EBITDA, the profitability is what's important. And that's how a company survives and sustains itself through the ups and downs of business.
So do you find when you talk to a new C-suite of a startup who potentially at the right phase for you, which we can come on to, what is that phase, but potentially at the right phase for you to support, do you find that pretty quickly if they're in that right mindset of I want to get it right or I want to be right, or are you coming across people and then having to sort of change their mindset to go, you're gonna have to go back to being adaptable and learning, realize that it doesn't matter if you think the product is the best thing to ever exist. It's not gonna, how are you approaching that? Are you looking for the right people to work with, or are you trying to educate them and convince them that there's a different way to do this?
Both. I'm trying to do both. You can't change someone's mind that doesn't want to be changed.
Right.
I'll know within the first 10 minutes of a conversation if somebody has the mindset of they would rather get it right and make millions than
Yeah.
be right and go broke and shut the whole company down.
Yeah.
I'll know within 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to argue with people.
Yeah.
The sooner the venture capital firm that has put the money into the company sees how we can come alongside of these companies and increase their commercial effectiveness, it's foolish for the portfolio company or the VC company not to bring us on board. They may not need us for a year. They may not need us for 3 years for a contract. They may only need us for 3 to 6 months, maybe only 3 days a month. Right? Because we're not here to replace the people. Although there are some C-suite executives that do need to be replaced because they're more worried about optics than reality.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to see how effective and efficient a motor is running in a car, you have to do a diagnostic check or an audit. The first thing I want to do with these companies, and we can do it cheap. We do it for 15 grand. We can do an audit of all 10 components of commercialization of a company, and we can give them a report and tell them exactly where the kryptonite is in each one of the 10 components of commercialization. And then they can pivot. They can course correct, right? But again, do they want to get it right or do they want to be right? I had one of my business coaches once say, Craig, a company is like the Titanic. And I was like, what? I had no idea where he was going with this. He said, Craig, business companies are like the Titanic. It can either float and get to the other destination, which would mean profitability, or they can hit an iceberg, the boat's sinking, water is coming up to the knees, but the orchestra is still playing, denying that there's holes in the boat. And I was like, wow, this is stuff you don't get in MBA school. This is stuff where you get one-on-one coaching from people who have been there and done it. And, you know, these are people that don't fly commercial anymore because they can afford not to. And it's like, well, I'm going to listen to you because not only do you have one business or company in this industry, but you got another company in another industry and another company in another industry, and they're all kicking butt. All of them. That's why you're a 9-figure person and I'm dreaming of being a 9-figure person. So I need your wisdom. I don't need your money. I need your brain.
Yeah.
That's why your brain is more effective. And I've literally begged some of these 9-figure and 2 literal billionaires to coach me in business because what they teach is not what gets taught in formal education.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, an hour spent with them is probably better than an MBA.
And I'm not knocking people who have an MBA. I got one too.
No, not
And I'll
at
tell you
all.
what, I'm glad I got it, but it's not that impressive because
Yeah.
if you look and see how people do business, they're not doing it like the people who have built multiple companies from scratch, right? And they're super successful.
Yeah.
Because in business, success equals finance. It just does.
Right.
If a business isn't profitable, I would say it's not a successful business.
Yeah. 100%. I feel like big tech and the fame of big tech. So if you think about like Google and Alphabet and Meta, etc. Um, a lot of these companies don't make money for a long time, but yet they're the sort of darlings of Wall Street kind of thing. And it can be if they're talked about on the news all the time and the success they're seeing and so forth, but yet they're never making money and they don't really have plans to make money. Obviously, then Facebook and Google have gone on to make a lot of money, but there's definitely an undertone in the tech industry. Profit is so far down the priority list, right? And it's constant scale and so forth. What's the sweet spot for you in terms of the phase of a company? Like, how early do you want to get in, and do you think you can have the best impact?
The earlier a startup gets us in, the more effective for them,
Yeah.
where the kryptonite can be prevented from creeping in. You look at the 10 components of commercialization, right? And I'll ask people, which component of the 10 components of commercialization are you guys struggling the most? And I've had some real jerks say to me, "Oh, did you read that out of a book?" No, I actually learned it from two serial entrepreneurs. That one was worth 283 million liquid, and the other one was worth 413 million liquid. I'm probably going to listen to them.
Yeah.
And then they shut up real fast, right? Because I'm like, why do you need to be a jerk about that? Because clearly you're not even close to them, and neither am I. So why don't we both listen to them? You know what I mean? I literally had a CEO of a startup say that to me a few weeks ago. And guess what? Their companies in 18 months has sold less than $30,000 worth of product.
Wow.
Probably not a smart idea to be cheeky, and arrogant when your company is failing, right? Market research is the number one component, is the first component of the 10 components of commercialization. If
Right.
your market research is inadequate or incomplete or inaccurate, then the product development, which is component number two, is going to be incomplete, inadequate, and not what the market wants. Then it cascades to regulatory. If it's a medical or healthcare technology that needs to be approved by a regulatory body in any specific country, then you're going to be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a product because of the market research inadequacies, developed a product that the market may or may not really want, or maybe it's only halfway effective in what they want. Then you're going to spend all that money in the regulatory to get approved. Then you go to production, which is the fourth component of commercialization, and then you're going to be making all these products through the production, which is the manufacturing component, right? That maybe people don't want. So you're going to be spending millions of dollars on inventory, creating inventory. Then marketing is your fifth component of commercialization. And you're going to be letting the world know that your product and services is now available and why they should own it. And you're trying to magnetically attract through your marketing campaigns customers who are willing to buy now, but they may not be buying because the market research was inaccurate. The product development was developed because of the market research that was inaccurate. And then you got to prove. You see how it cascades?
Yeah.
And then the sixth component is sales strategy. And I'll be honest with you, I find that the vast majority of sales leaders are not teaching their sales teams how to use emotional pulling dialogue and neuro-emotional persuasion questioning to get the potential customer to rationalize on their own why they should need the product or service. I find that the vast majority of sales leaders and sales representatives show and tell. They don't sell. They show and they tell. That's not selling. And then you look at the financing and the budgets to keep the SG&A down so that the company can be profitable, right? So they're not overspending on expenses, right? That gets all messed up because of everything earlier. And then you start working on partnerships and alliances, and those may or may not work really well because if the product's not selling very well and the vast majority of the market isn't adopting the products and services that are being offered, then the customer support and services, they're frustrated, which is the ninth customer support, sales or customer support and services, the ninth component of commercialization. And then the 10th component of commercialization is post-market analysis. Then you look back at all of the cascading effects that you do, and you're like, why isn't our company growing? Right? Well, it's because the customer adoption is low. Right? And it's interesting. I learned that there are very few companies that are part of the 30-20-10 club. And I'll throw that up on social media and I'll have people privately DM me and go, Craig, what's the 30-20-10 club? It's 30% growth year over year. I don't care if you're a company that's been around 100 years or you're a company that's been around 4 years. You can make your product and service grow 30% year over year with the right commercialization processes, strategies, and tactics.
30% profit growth?
30%, no, 30% annual growth revenue.
Okay.
And then the 20 is 20% SG&A expenses, 20% or below. And then the 10 is the 10% EBITDA or greater. That's the 30-20-10 club. When a company focuses on getting it right small, and they can get part of that 30-20-10 club while they're small, they're going to be able to scale incredibly effective. And that's another thing. I hear companies talking about scale your business. Until you get to about 5 to 10 million in revenue, scaling should never come out of your mouth. And that is directly from people who have scaled, that I personally know who have scaled 15 businesses or more. I mean, one of the guys I know has literally scaled 31 businesses in 32 years. Wow. I'm going to remain him nameless because I don't have his permission to say it, but on a one-on-one conversation, I'll tell you who it is.
Can I ask you
right?
this thing, Craig? So
Yeah.
with your 10-step commercialization strategy process, where do you see the biggest shortfall? Are we talking right at the start of market research, or does it tend to fall apart certain stage through? Like, where is the biggest problem happening?
Market research is the number one component of commercialization, of the 10 components of commercialization. I wouldn't say there's one specific, but there are a handful. Most market research, when we do an audit of a company's market research and what they've done, we do find a lot of kryptonite. We do find that they didn't spend enough time. We have a worksheet that's part of our audit methodology that I give away for free. The other 9 components I don't give away for free. But the market research one I give away for free so people can see how we audit or start an audit when we start interviewing people within the company. And that's how we find that most market research is either inadequate or incomplete because they didn't spend enough time asking really uncomfortable questions, not only of themselves, but to the people that they're researching and talking to, right? Potential customers, potential people that would use the product or service.
Do people tend to get an idea in their head for their own tech and then
100%.
yeah, like that would be, that's what I was thinking. Like, I can imagine, I've got a great idea, and just never actually going to do the hard work and the hard questions to go, is anybody going to buy this? Sounds
Right.
nice.
Right. Right. And then the other three really are marketing and selling. I see so many jobs for people in marketing, and they're like, oh, must have 15 years experience, must have 10 years of experience. Experience in marketing doesn't mean you're effective. The job of a marketer, when we boil all the upstream, downstream, side stream, all the, fancy words and stuff, at the end of the day, marketing is nothing more than creating the buzz of the product and service the company offers to the marketplace and getting potential buyers to say, yes, I'm interested in learning more, or yes, I'm interested in buying this now. The job of a marketer, when we boil it all down, is to create a red umbrella in a black umbrella world. Attention is the currency of attraction to somebody who might buy, who is willing to buy, or isn't sure they should buy yet. And I will tell you, the vast majority of people in marketing that I've either worked with or know are okay at it. But I have not, I shouldn't say I have not. I rarely see people who are phenomenal at their craft in marketing by creating major attention to the company or to the product or service that is being offered to the marketplace. They're not very good at creating a red umbrella in a black umbrella world, or another analogy, a neon green fish in a silverfish lake.
So what you're saying is people go looking for experience to basically hire a marketing person, plug and play, off the
Right.
shelf success in marketing, and go, you've done that, do it here.
But is it
Ra-
success?
Right. Rather
That's what I
than
say to people.
going,
The word success is so vague
right.
and it's thrown out so often. But when we look under the hood, this was interesting, right? This is one of the statistics that I was told by a very high level serial entrepreneur with private equity firms. 93.6% of US based companies never generate $1 million in revenue in a 12-month period. That's scary. People say, Craig, where do you get those numbers? SBA.gov.
So almost 94% of companies, regardless of how good the product is, can never produce $1 million in revenue in a year.
That is correct. 32.8 million small businesses in the United States. Small businesses categorized as 500 employees or less. There's 32.8 of them. Okay. Now that includes the hat shop on the corner. It includes the little grocery store, but it also includes a $1 billion company with 388 employees. Because the small business is not based on revenue, it's based on the amount of employees.
Yeah.
Right? So when you look at that, so let's just say it's 93%. 93% of companies do not bring in $1 million in revenue
Yeah.
in their company.
Yeah.
Out of the 7% that do bring in a million or more, only 4% of the 7% reach 10 million in revenue. That's 0.28% of 32.8 million companies with 500 employees or less ever reach 10 million in revenue in 12 consecutive months. So when I see all this stuff on LinkedIn and Instagram about how, all these people are so successful, it's hogwash.
Yeah.
It's a lie. KKR, Apollo, Blackstone, Goldman Sachs, SBA.gov, they have all the data and they validate that data. But you see what I'm saying? Like, there's no way all these companies can be successful. And people are like, but if you get your company to 1 million, you are successful. I don't disagree. If you're a company, whether you're a MedTech, health tech, hat shop, or you're selling truck tires, if your company if your company brings in top line revenue 1 million a year, you're in the top 7% of all businesses in the United States.
It's wild.
I used to have people argue with me with that earlier, last year when I started posting this stuff. And then I'd send them right to the horse's mouth where all the data comes from, and didn't hear anything from them to argue with me because they went, oh my gosh, this is real. So if you're a company that makes 10 million, that brings in 10 million in revenue in 12 consecutive months, you're in the top 0.28% of companies in the United States. I don't know about the world. It would even be of a lesser percentage if it's the world.
Yeah.
But at least in the US.
How often are companies that are further along, that are revenue generating, but they're just not profitable, they're not growing at the rate, how often are they reaching out and utilizing someone like yourself? Maybe a better way to frame it would be, how many...
Very rarely. It's me reaching out to them because they're scared that they're going to be judged, that they don't know what they're doing. Well, business is hard. You can know exactly what to do, and it still may not work out.
Yeah.
And so commercialization has so many variables to it that when you look under the hood and a company lets you in, they're going to be exposed. They're going to be exposed for their successes, and they're going to be exposed for their failures. But again, do they want to be right? Or do they want to get it right and change their generational financial family tree for 2, 3, 4 generations?
So that's the same problem in terms of mentality, the willingness to change, right, and adapt and be wrong, right? But it's probably for completely different reasons, right? Because the startup founder who has that problem is that there's probably a lot of pride and so forth that's driving that. But like you're saying, that there's someone who's deep in, years in, and just isn't getting the growth, isn't getting the commercial success for a product they believe in. It's a different problem in that being exposed and having someone tell you the way you're running your business, your baby, the way you've done this for 5 years is wrong. We need to change, and so people just don't want to seek. They don't want to hear that. They do not want to.
So if that's the case, which it is,
Right.
they would rather be right and let the Titanic sink
Yeah.
than willing to admit we need help, get it right, and literally change their financial family tree for 2 or 3 or 4 generations.
Yeah.
And part of it comes down to the culture that's being created in that company, right? If a company's at 20 or 25 million, they're still creating their culture.
Yeah.
Right? And when people say, I see on LinkedIn all the time and social media, transformational leader. There's been like 5 transformational leaders in the last 30 years.
Not according to LinkedIn.
I'm just being
I think I'm
honest.
linked into about 1,000 of them.
Right. I mean, whether you like the people or not, they're amazing at business.
Yeah,
Steve Jobs, Elon Musk,
yeah.
Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, right? Bezos. Again, it doesn't matter if we like them or not. That has nothing to do with it. We're not building fraternities and sororities here, right? For university. And that's another thing. People need to start hiring people who are mastering or currently have mastered their craft. We got to stop hiring people because they fit a blind obedience based culture in a company. Right?
When you now that you're involved in multiple startups, what are the cultural traits that you see that really work in those early stage companies?
Nobody is afraid to speak the truth because there's no retribution or retaliation of that person by speaking truth. That has to be number one. Again, do you want to build a fraternity or sorority, or do you want to build a business?
Yeah.
Right? People say, well, I got to hire people that I really like. Well, are you planning on going on vacations with these people? You're hiring people to build a business. Now, do you need to be able to get along with them and work with them? Absolutely. Right? Nobody wants to work with a bunch of jerks. Right? But at the end of the day, you would rather hire somebody that gives you blind obedience than somebody who uses critical thinking skills to push back on you when you're not probably making the most effective decision as a leader? I want pushback as a leader. And I just had a conversation with somebody from a Fortune 100 company the other day. They said, Craig, I don't really like it when my team pushes back. I said, why? Don't you want your team to sharpen your business acumen? Welcome pushback. Doesn't mean you don't push back as well, but let them push on you because everything that you're doing is the best or most effective. So let them sharpen you. Take the feedback and take it to one of your business coaches. And that's another thing. I find that most people don't have business coaches. I don't know why. You know, Tiger Woods at his prime had 5 coaches. Kobe Bryant at his prime had, I think it was 6 coaches. Michael Jordan had 4 coaches. I mean, these are people that considered themselves professional athletes. Well, if we consider ourselves a professional business executive, why aren't we paying for coaching? It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Well, I have a mentor. Your mentor's not going to tell you and push back on you hard because you're not paying them to push you hard. They don't want to put a strain on that relationship. Well, guess what? When you pay for a business coach, they're going to put a strain on the relationship because you're paying them to push you beyond your comfort zone.
What advice would you give to commercial leaders who, or even business founders, C-suite startup founders, stuff like that, that want to find a business coach but don't know how?
They need to reach out to some of the most successful, truly successful business people they know, or even if they don't know, and ask them, hey, if I pay you or pay your charity some money, would you be willing to meet with me twice a month for an hour at a time on Google Meet or Zoom or Teams or whatever? Right? The more financially successful somebody is, the more honored they are to give away their wisdom, because there's a difference between intelligence and wisdom. Intelligence is obviously IQ, but wisdom is knowing how to adapt and how to implement and how to use the intelligence. That's what we're missing in the business world, is wisdom. Wisdom only comes from a lot of scars in business. So when companies don't hire some of the more seasoned people in business, they're foolish. They're absolutely foolish
Mm.
because wisdom doesn't come from intelligence. Wisdom comes from the scars of life in business.
How many companies are you involved in at the moment, Craig? How many companies?
Right now, I'm in two companies at the moment. And in 6 minutes, I have a meeting with a VC to talk about two of their portfolio companies that need help. And it's such
That's
an honor because I want to come alongside of them. I'm not here to tell them you're doing something wrong. I'm here to say, listen, I found the kryptonite in your business. Holy cow. Or maybe Jordan or Troy in my company, right, found the kryptonite in that company's business. Guess what? Let's eradicate it and let's replace it with something that really works.
mm,
It's such a privilege. It really
yeah,
is. It
yeah,
really, really
100%.
is. A company can hire us to do an audit for 15 measly $1,000. 15 grand. That's it. We've priced all of our services so that a startup company that's bootstrapped isn't going to shell out a ton of money and hurt them.
Right.
Yeah, could we make more money doing stuff like that? Yeah, we could. But we're not here for a money grab. I'm just sick and tired of seeing so many companies fail due to low customer adoption of the products and services they sell, that
Mm.
they offer.
It's awesome. What's your hope for 2025? Is your hope that more companies swallow pride and
Yeah,
start to reach out and collaborate? Yeah.
I do. I want more companies to say, hey, Craig, you know what? We don't have it all together. And I know you don't either. So guess what? Would you work with us and have us work together and put all of our brains together to see where the problem is in our commercialization that we're not getting high rates of customer adoption? That's what I hope.
Mm.
Because then companies will start being profitable sooner and they'll start selling for a higher multiple.
Yeah. I think what you're doing is awesome. I think the way you're doing it is awesome as well, and the approach. The statistics are scary, really
Very
scary.
scary. And from what I've been told from people from like Goldman Sachs and KKR and Apollo and Blackstone and stuff like that, is I guess it's not just from 2013 to 2023. I guess this has been going on for over 35 years. The data hasn't changed. Well, I think the reason the data hasn't changed, and I say I think because I don't know, is that consumers and potential customers are getting smarter about the objections and they're starting to figure out how to object to the sales and marketing and the commercialization of a product or service. And the buyer's resistance wall is growing higher and higher and higher.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Craig, thank you so much for the
You're
insight
welcome. This was
today.
super fun.
Yeah, and I loved walking through the 10 steps as well because I'm really glad that you were able to open up to that, and
Yeah. I
it's
was supposed to have
fantastic to
my
hear.
book already published
When's the
first
book coming
quarter
out?
of this year, and I'm pretty behind on it. So I gotta get that sucker finished because a lot of people are waiting on that book. About the 10 components of commercialization and everything. And it's not that it's like this super um, secretive thing, right? It's common sense.
Mm,
But the problem is we overcomplicate business and it's complicated enough.
yeah.
If we want to attract high levels of customer adoption for the products and services that companies offer, we have to stop doing some of the ridiculous nonsense things that we're doing. We're gonna target this hospital that's 350 beds. It's gonna take you 16 months to get into that hospital. Why
Yeah.
aren't you going for the hospitals that have 60 beds?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, come on, you know?
Well, well, when the book comes out, we'll have to talk again. I'd love to hear more about that, I'm sure,
Yes.
and I would love to read it because I'm fascinated by business strategy and all things
Yeah, yeah.
commercialization. So,
Well, the only reason I have the knowledge I have is because I've paid a lot of highly, and I'm going to use this word, highly ultra successful serial entrepreneurs who have done it over and over and over and over again. And most of these business coaches that I have, they fly private. They don't fly commercial. And unfortunately, I still fly commercial.
Yeah, don't we both? Thank you so much. I appreciate the insight. Appreciate your time. I
You're
knew this would
welcome.
be great, and it has been great. So
Yeah, I really like your podcast, man. I think more and more and more people should listen to it and really digest the information from the different guests you have, because it doesn't just add intelligence; it adds wisdom.
thank you so much, Craig. It's been great having you, and I look forward to speaking to you again.
Sounds good.
So much.
Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to the show. I hope it was insightful and inspiring. This podcast is brought to you by Elevra Consulting. We are a commercially focused recruitment agency focused on medtech and life sciences. If we can help you in your job search, or if you're hiring commercial talent, please reach out to me on LinkedIn, David Philby, or at our website, elevraconsulting.com. Thanks again.